a Bf-109 roars across the British sky with a Hawker Hurricane hot on his tail. Tracers streak past the German's canopy as he desperately tries to turn the tide of the dogfight in his favour. Dodging, diving and turning, he attempts every trick in the book to absolutely no avail, for he isn't going against the average RAF pilot. At the controls of the enemy fighter is a man with nothing to lose, someone who has watched his home burn under the hand of the German army and is hungry for revenge, an ace in exile. His name is Mirosław Ferić. It's the 1st of September 1939 at a field near Warsaw in Poland. Ferić and his fellow pilots gather in front of their leader, Zdzisław Krasnodębski, also known as the King. He speaks words of valour and courage, for today the Germans have begun their invasion of Poland. Ferić cheers alongside his fellows. They're driven and committed, with the tales of Polish might, heroism and chivalry fresh in their mind. For the future, Ferić opted to start a diary of their activities, aware of the historical impact of what was to come. Little did he know, the fight was as brutal as it was unfair. The Poles bravely flew their outdated PZL P-11Cs against the hordes of German bombers, escorted by far superior Bf-109s and 110s. By sheer skill, they had claimed a handful of victories and repelled a couple of attacks, but their inferiority, both numerical and in equipment quality, was unmanageable. The third day, Ferić found himself in a dogfight against a Bf-110 when one of the fighters got on his tail, and there was nothing he could do to avoid it. Mid-turn, the enemy riddled his aircraft side with bullets, shredding its fuselage and shooting off the control stick from his hands. Powerless, Ferić spun down to the ground, the G's pinning him to the seat. He could do nothing but watch the green forest below coming closer and closer until the disintegrating aircraft miraculously rolled and expelled him from the open cockpit. Ferić barely managed to open his chute and drift gently to the ground below. It was there, sitting, defeated in the forests of his beloved homeland, watching his compatriots faring little better than himself, that the reality of his situation seriously began to set in. By the fifth day, the squadron was a shadow of its former self, and the Luftwaffe bombed Polish land at will. The Polish squadron claimed 8 victories to 36 lost aircraft. With the nation on the brink of defeat, the men were ordered to flee to fight another day. Krasnodębski led the sorry flight to neighbouring Romania. From there, the Poles were pushed from country to country, followed by rumours of their almost immediate defeat and greeted with contempt by the Allies. In this time of inaction, Ferić continued with his diary, asking other pilots to put in some entries as well. After a while, they found themselves in Britain in an all-too-familiar escape. The Poles were thrown into some barracks to waste away and not even allowed to fly patrols. But with losses mounting for the RAF, after a time, the Poles were finally given their opportunity to shine. They were formed into a new 303rd RAF squadron, with their old squadron leader, Krasnodębski. They were brought to Northolt, an airfield west of London, to meet their British squadron leader, Ronald Kellett, a wealthy volunteer with not a single hour of combat under his belt. Things did not get off to a smooth start. Kellett was a firm subscriber to the idea of Polish incompetence and treated the men as such. Ferić and the rest of the Polish veterans were sent to learn English, the imperial measurement system, and many more things that they found unnecessary. The mutual disrespect reached extremes that would have boiled over if it hadn't been for the King. Krasnodębski became a stabilising force, cheering up the men of the 303rd while pressuring the British to move on to flight as soon as possible. Finally, they were presented to their new birds, the modern Hawker Hurricane. In the air, the Poles were in their element. They raced through the programme, and on August the 30th, it would come to a spectacular end. Ferić was behind the controls of his Hurricane, practicing attacks on bombers, when Kellett ordered the formation back to base. Germans were approaching, and they weren't yet cleared for combat. He sighed and begrudgingly followed Kellett back to Northolt, but in the rear of the formation, another pilot was having a very different idea. Pilot Ludwik Paskevich had had enough. He broke formation and slammed the throttle to full, roaring across the sky towards the enemy, all on his own. After a minute, he spots a Bf-109 diving away from a fellow Hurricane. He pounces, charging down to intercept the fleeing German. In a blur, the 109 is struck by a barrage of bullets from the flank. The second Hurricane sees Paskevich coming and pulls off the attack as the pilot of the 303rd shreds the German machine to pieces. The enemy bursts into flames as he witnesses the 109 twist in the air and impact on the ground with a fiery explosion. A weight lifted from his shoulders. He'd done it. Back at Northolt, Ferić waited for news on Paskevich when suddenly he hears the unmistakable roar of a Hawker Hurricane in the distance. He runs out of his barracks with the other pilots and witnesses Paskevich arriving over the treetops, barrel rolling over the airfield in celebration. The men erupt in cheers. Paskevich landed to the applause of his comrades, only for a furious British officer to storm through the gathered men and order Paskevich to the group captain's office for a verbal beatdown. But this wouldn't dampen his spirits. Immediately after getting the biggest dressing down of his career, he went straight to Ferić with a smile on his face and asked for the diary. There he wrote, "I have fired at an enemy aircraft for the first time in my life." That night the men celebrated. The notoriously sober Paskevich got outrageously drunk, and the celebrations got even bigger when Kellett informed the men the squadron was now fully operational. They would see action the very next day. At 6 in the afternoon, the order came to scramble. Ferić ran for his Hurricane alongside all of his brothers, and the orchestra of war machines came to life in just 2 minutes. The Flight A of the squadron headed to intercept enemy bombers on their way to London when they spotted a group of Bf-109s in the distance guarding the bombers. The first 3 Hurricanes under Kellett's lead charged the enemy with the sun behind their backs, and in an instant, 3 enemy fighters burst into flames. The rest of the enemy gave chase to their attackers, but unwittingly showed their backs to the 3 remaining Poles, with Ferić among them. Ferić dived into the fray, picking a target and racing after him. The German pulled off his pursuit of an Allied Hurricane and turned his entire attention to avoiding Ferić. Ferić matched the German, chasing after him and bringing him into his sights. He would write, "I was surprised and puzzled at the ease of it. Their fuselage filled the entire diameter of the luminous ring. The result was immediate and wonderful." In just an hour, the 303rd had claimed 6 victories with 0 casualties of their own. The animosity of the past month seemingly vanished with the first sight of burning Messerschmitts. Kellett grew to respect the Polish pilots, and having downed his first German plane that day, became one of their own. And the successes continued. They took to the skies every day that followed, fighting fearlessly in defense of the Isles. Throughout it all, Ferić dutifully continued writing into his diary, explaining in an entry,
"Jestem zdeterminowany, aby zachować wszystko, co może być zapomniane. Wszystko, co jest nam teraz najdroższe. Bohaterskie czyny naszych pilotów na polu bitwy."
Their efforts would reach their peak on the 15th of September, when a massive last-ditch push was made by the Luftwaffe to destroy the RAF once and for all. Hundreds of German bombers and fighters crossed the Channel in the biggest attack of the Blitz, focused entirely on wreaking devastation upon London. The Poles rose to the occasion, with the 303rd, as well as the many others scattered in squadrons across the RAF. They charged like cavalry, throwing themselves at the enemy with near-suicidal maneuvers and unleashing devastating broadsides from point-blank range. Their volleys ripped wings and fuselages in half like saws. In the flurry of crisscrossing tracers, German crosses and British roundels are torn apart and engulfed in flames. Pilots of both sides bail en masse. The giant melee of aircraft causing hundreds of parachutes to sprout in the sky amidst the rain of aircraft debris. the Polish squadron would end that day battered, but victorious. The RAF successfully repelled the onslaught, and the squadron would be credited with 16 downed enemies, but tragically, they lost one pilot. Statistically, it was incredibly good, but numbers did little to ease the pain of a tight-knit group of friends. The squadron would continue to fight throughout the war, racking up a stunning record, but tragically, Ferić would not live to see its end. He passed away in February 1942, near the base that he called his home throughout the Battle of Britain, when a wing on his Spitfire disintegrated and it plummeted to earth in a spin. His loss was greatly felt by the men of the squadron, who took to the task of continuing his diary in his honour. By the end of the war, it was thousands of pages long, encompassing 7 volumes, full of the day-to-day actions of the brave men, tales of their battles, and obituaries for the fallen. Today, it resides in the Polish Institute and Sikorsky Museum in London. It's always hard to estimate the exact contribution of every unit into such huge battles as the Battle of Britain. Beyond all question, 303 Squadron was one of the most impactful units of the RAF. Initial wartime reports mention 126 victories by 303 Squadron during the battle. According to the most recent research, they are credited with over 58 verified victories, which still makes them the most efficient aerial unit in the battle. Sadly, post-war wasn't kind to the valiant airmen. Their beloved Poland was left in the hands of the USSR, the same nation that had allied with Germany to destroy them in 1939. But not all was lost. The pilots spread across the West, and some even lived to see Poland remove itself from the Soviet Union's influence and return to see their beloved homeland free after so many years. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and please watch more videos of ours. Thank you.